they got even no idea on what to do next.
Finding the truth in these uncertain times has become certain. Possibilities for business even more convenient with the Nation e-paper. To enjoy this and more, simply dial star 550 star 1 hash for Daily Nation and star 550 star 5 hash for Business Daily on your mobile phone and get 50% discount on the e-paper. Yes, for just 20 shillings each, the truth will find you and more possibilities right where you are. Dial star 550 star 1 hash for Daily Nation and star 550 star 5 hash for Business Daily today. Terms and conditions apply.
This is NTV.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on the Nation Leadership Forum, whose focus tonight is on women's property rights, a conversation that comes as the country marks 10 years since the promulgation of the Constitution, which gave life to a progressive legal framework that safeguards the rights of women in property and land ownership. Now, a decade later, we take stock of the achievements thus far and what could be slowing down a process kick-started with good intent. My name is Gladys Gashanja and I am joined by a panel of experts and stakeholders to have this pertinent conversation. First off, in studio, we are joined by Jessica Oluoch, who is a human rights lawyer and also a senior programs officer for the Women's Property Rights Program at KELIN. Now, the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network is an NGO whose objective is reclaiming rights and rebuilding lives. Also in studio, Faith Alube, CEO of the Kenya Land Alliance. The Kenya Land Alliance is an NGO that advocates for enabling land laws and policies in Kenya for equitable access to land and land-based resources. Joining us virtually is Honorable Justice Abida Ali Aroni. She is the judge of the High Court in the Family Division, and the Family Division is an arm of a judiciary dedicated to family matters. Also joining us virtually from Kisumu is Bishop Kasuku Kalolo, an elder in the Luo Council of Elders. He is not only an elder, but also a religious leader. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation. And of course, our sign language interpreter there is David Agondoa. Now, as I mentioned, we just marked 10 years since the promulgation of the new constitution, which entails great laws that safeguard women's property rights. Now, let's take stock of where we are right now. Land inheritance and acquisition of the same seems to be a thorn in the flesh for many, many women. From where you sit at the Kenya Land Alliance, how are we doing, Faith?
Thank you very much for having me this evening, Gladys. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. I'd say that most women cannot access land as owners. Most of us have a limited bundle of rights. We can access and use, but we cannot own and control. And this has been something that has been systematic and systemic. It's been systematic and systemic because, as we understand, that 70% of land in Kenya is community land. Community land is governed by traditional mechanisms. Traditional mechanisms have very little patience of including women in leadership or governance processes. So with time, it's become systematic and systemic because women have not been included for a very long time in the management and governance of land. So I'd say, according to our research in 2017, where we were trying to find out of the 4.5 million titles that have been issued by the Jubilee government from 2013 to 2017, out of 4.5 million titles, 1%, only 1% reflect an individual woman. The rest are either matrimonial property or property that is owned by men. So I'd say we are not doing so well. But I'd say the policy framework is progressive, and we will there's room for improvement. That's what I'd say.
Okay, and we will talk more about that to understand why only 1%. Now, land policy principles in the Constitution talk of the elimination of all forms of gender discrimination in law and customs and practices related to land and property. From a human rights perspective, how are we doing, Jessica?
Thank you so much, Gladys. I think we do understand that the intent of the Constitution was to be able to include women's rights within the Constitution. And we do appreciate that the Constitution that we've had for the last 10 years has recognized the rights of women to be able to own land either by themselves or in association with other people. But also we do recognize that it has also sort of tried to eliminate discrimination when it comes to property right violations, and has had and outlined the policies that we need in order for us to be able to access land. I think one of the major things that we can talk about with regard to the Constitution is the fact that it has brought into light various other legislations that have been relating to land and property rights and the rights of women, either women individually or women in marriages. I think, for instance, we talk about the Marriage Act that recognizes the various forms of marriages that we have. We talk about the Land Act that do recognize the registration also of women within title. They can do it as an individual, they can do it with their brothers and sisters, they can do it with their spouses. And we've also had various legislation that have been progressive. But despite this, I would say that there has been a slight gap with regard to the implementation of these laws, because as Faith has said, 1%, that means there is a problem. As much as we have the good laws, then that means that there is something that is missing. So today we hope to have those conversations for us to be able to demystify. Why is it that we have good laws? Why is it that it has been 10 years since the Constitution came into play, but still we have women not being able to claim their rights?
Said that is the intent of this conversation. Now, the Constitution emphasizes also on the recognition of traditional dispute resolution mechanisms. Now, Elder Kalolo, how have elders considered to be the gatekeepers of tradition and culture contributed to this cause?
Thank you very much, Gladys. Obviously, elders are the gateway and the gatekeepers of the culture, because they happen to have known their culture a little deeper than anyone else. And in the event of this, it is true that every society, every community has got the rules by which they live. Otherwise, without any rules and laws, people would not be able to live. So the guidelines are there, and that is why it is possible for us to mediate in cases of disputes. So that whenever there is a dispute, we bring in our cultural laws, and then we harmonize them with the Constitution and also with the Bible. And when we do that, we always come out with very amicable solutions, and people live comfortably, going rejoicing. So it is true that elders are the custodians of the culture. And culture, if used well, it comes out very, very harmoniously. But many times we have got retrogressive kind of cultures. People have misunderstood. Sometimes they are misconstrued negatively. And this brings about a lot of conflict.
Okay, and we'll talk more about the same. Justice Oroni, Jessica has mentioned that there's so many legislations that have been done or put in place to reinforce the equal rights of women in as far as owning property is concerned. Now, I'm told we've lost Justice Oroni, but at this point, ignorance of their property rights has been said to greatly work against women. We have, as mentioned, Matrimonial Property Act of 2013 that safeguards a lot of women's rights. So what are the gains from this act, Jessica?
Thank you so much, Gladys. I think it's with regard to recognizing the rights of women within a marriage. So, of course, it takes into play the aspect that it sort of operationalizes what the Constitution says about the right to equality. That parties are equal to a marriage before the marriage, during the marriage, and after the marriage. And therefore, it renders the parties to this marriage to be able to be equal. But I know as much as we do have the positive aspects, of course we always have to have the challenging issues. And for a very long time, we've always had discussions relating to aspects of contribution, because that is one of the aspects that is outlined in the Matrimonial Property Act, especially when it comes to divorce, separation, and it comes to division of property. Then the aspect of contribution comes in. And the question has always been, if equality is supposed to be applied as it is in the Constitution, which is 50-50, what happens in cases of divorce? But in practicality, we have seen people we have seen cases in court where people are talking about the aspect of contribution according to what you brought into the marriage. And this is becoming a little bit problematic, because at the end of the day, everyone enters into the marriage equal, and everyone enters into the marriage expecting that whatever is gotten in the course of the marriage is supposed to be equal, to be divided equally among the parties. But now, when you are asking, for example, women or even men to be able to prove their contribution, then now that one means more of producing receipts, and it makes it more of a very hard aspect to be able to say that this is the equality that was intended in the Constitution.
So some of the limitations in as far as the matrimonial Property Act of 2013, Faith, it also does not cover ancestral property which has been inherited from a husband's father. Talk about that.
As Jessica has indicated, ancestral property can become matrimonial property if both spouses can prove contribution to improvement of a property. You have to improve the property. If you found it like it was a field without anything, and during the subsistence of the marriage, you've built something on that property. But that even said, Gladys, I think we should appreciate the fact that the law is not absolute. The law cannot be the ultimate answer to some of these issues, because there is a big gap between policy and practice. It's very important that even as women are protected by the law, even women themselves arm themselves with enough knowledge so that they can know how to identify and claim their rights in whatever bundle of rights they operate in. If it's control, use, access, or ownership, they should understand these are my rights, and these are the way that I can expand my rights and use and enjoy my rights as a woman.
Now, Justice Ronnie, I understand you're back with us, and the question to you earlier was, how would you appraise the status of achieving women's rights in as far as acquisition of property or inheritance on the corridors of justice?
Thank you, and sorry I went off air. I think with the incoming of the Constitution 2010, other legislation was put in place, and right now we have very progressive laws that govern the rights, property rights of women. As you're aware, as a judiciary, we only deal with what is brought to us, and statistics have it that only about 1% of women turn to court when they have issues that relate to their rights. So what I would say is that the laws are in place, and probably what we need to do now is to educate women and the rest of the country about the laws that relate to women, and the fact that discrimination is not permitted or allowed by the Constitution and the laws that govern the rights.
Okay, and from where you sit, what are the pluses and minuses when it comes to succession and distribution of matrimonial property under the Marriage Act of 2014?
The Marriage Act 2014 is very progressive in terms of recognition of the rights of the married couple. The Matrimonial Property Act adds value as well, because it recognizes, property acquired during marriage and contribution by both parties, and not necessarily monetary contribution. It recognizes contribution made by women in keeping and maintaining households, childbirth and taking care of children, giving company to their spouses, and working on family businesses. So the laws are progressive. They may not be 100%, but we have come a long way since the promulgation of the new constitution and since the new laws were enacted and put in place.
Okay, and elders come in handy when we're talking about being the gatekeepers of culture and tradition. Bishop Kalolo, are elders educated on these matters of the law we speak of?
Yes, thank you very much, Gladys. Actually, it is that education which has empowered elders to get to know the depth of the Constitution and also relate it with culture and traditions so that we arrive at the rights that we are talking about. Kelin has done a lot of good work in this region trying to educate the elders on the Constitution and the rights of women in particular, and even those of land and property. Also along with that, many people do not know, and I think it is a big burden on the shoulder of our government that many people, mostly women, do not know their rights in terms of land. And so there is need to sensitize them the more. As Justice has just said, lack of knowledge to people's rights makes them even like slaves. And I think something should be done to educate the people on their rights. That is why women do not even accept that the laws that were made in their favor are being enacted and are being useful to them in terms of land acquisition and even management and use. So I think there is need to further give them education, the right sensitization, so that they get to know the limits that they can do. Otherwise, ordinarily, there are men who will want to take advantage. And as they take advantage, it is in their favor, and it is against the women's rights. So they will take away the rights of the women without proper cause. And that is what we are advocating against.
And speaking of risk factors, there are instances where widows or children of the female gender are denied their rights to inheriting property. In this case, Elder Kalolo touches on ignorance being the biggest issue here. From your experience, Faith, how has that led to infringing on their rights?
We can say ignorance is legal ignorance is part of the problem, but I'd say that the biggest problem is legal pluralism. We have so many laws affecting one issue, and we expect a lay woman to know that I need to know some sections of the Constitution, I need to understand some sections of the Community Land Act 2016, I need to understand some sections of the Matrimonial Property Act 2013, I need to understand what the Marriage Act says 2013. Already, those are 4 laws that I've mentioned. For lay people, it's such a challenge. So legal ignorance, but also legal pluralism, we lack, in some instances, I can say we lack some form of policy coherence so that the women can understand their rights from their own perspectives. I'd also say that the issue of fear of ostracization from societies, because you get that a woman finds a form of validation from the community she's married into, or they normally say a woman is a wife of the community. So the fear of ostracization that you'll not associate with Faith, because Faith sued her father-in-law in order to possess some matrimonial property, is also something that comes up a lot. So as much as we are saying that ignorance is part of it, even some of us women perpetrate it against fellow women. So we should be aware that as women, we have laws that we should know about, but we should also educate ourselves further and understand the community dynamics so that we can be able to claim our rights as women who want to possess land.
Now, there are some structures that have been put in place to ensure that we safeguard the rights of women when it comes to inheritance and ownership of property. Jessica, we have those chiefs. They play a huge role in our communities. Talk about that.
Thank you so much, Gladys. I I think I will pick from where Judge has left, because she has said that only 1% go to court.
Yes.
So the question is, where do the 99% go? Because access to justice has many forms. It can be formal, it can be informal. From our experience, we have seen alternative dispute resolution mechanisms work, especially due to the fact that sometimes these women cannot be able to afford to go to court. Sometimes these women are violated, but as Faith has said, sometimes they don't even know that they've been violated because they don't understand the law. So what does that mean? It means that they cannot be able to claim their rights. As Kellen, we have been working closely with the cultural structures, where we're working with the elders, we're working with the chiefs, for them to be able to facilitate access to justice for the most vulnerable in the community. So this could be women, could be widows, could be the child-headed households, could be orphans who cannot be able to access the formal courts. And how they do this is to be able to find the thin line between the culture and the law, because sometimes we can say the law is not the solution. So if, for example, the law is not the solution, then what other factors do we look at? People's traditions and values highly affect the rights of women, because there are societies that we have where people have misconstrued culture, and they're using the same culture to be able to deny women the right to property. And even in cases where women have gone to court and gotten positive judgments, when they go back to the ground, then it becomes very hard for them to be able to claim these rights. That's why we have been working with the elders, first of all, to be able to mediate the cases, but also the chiefs, being that they are duty bearers and they are the gatekeepers to the community, then they can be able to follow up and ensure that these women are claiming their rights, they're getting access to justice, and they're getting the basic documentation that they need in order for them to be able to continue enjoying their rights.
Justice Oroni, we talk about the basic documentation that you can get from the chief. I know about the beneficiary letter from the chief. What exactly is this, and how important is it in seeking or accessing justice?
Chief's letter is a very important document when it comes to application of or petitioning of letters of administration. We require, as a matter of procedure, that every applicant or every petitioner should, amongst very many other documents, produce a letter introducing and giving details of the heirs. And this is very, very important, because from where we sit, we do not have information or the background of the litigants. So a chief, being an administrator closer to the petitioner or the applicant, would ordinarily be in a position to do some investigation, some background check, and give us details of the legitimate heirs to a deceased estate. So it's a very, very important document, and we heavily rely on the same to be able to determine the legitimate heirs to a given estate.
Oh Lord, the chiefs have been known to also orchestrate the infringement of women's rights. How do you deal with them or with such circumstances?
Letters that do not give correct information, but as you realize, the courts cannot go out to investigate. So we do hope that through interaction and civic education, the chiefs or administrators will be able to appreciate the weight that the court gives on letters that they give out to the petitioners. It's a key document, and we are hoping that chiefs will be able to appreciate and be honest enough to determine and give us correct information. But you cannot be 100% sure of what comes out, knowing the society that we are living in. So, but information always seeps out, because those who are left out ordinarily would object, and the court gives them a listening ear.
Lolo, do you have instances where you have to deal with chiefs who've gone rogue, so to speak?
Well, there are times the chief thought that when we come in to do mediation, they were interfering with their work. And so some of them became a little difficult. But with the time, I think they are becoming more and more positive, so that when we approach them, they do know, because we don't work as judges, we only mediate so that it's a win-win situation. Nobody is convicted, only the rights are spoken about, and people sit around and discuss, and we live very amicable as friends. So the chiefs, formerly they used to be very tough and difficult, but right now they have become very cooperative. Whenever we call upon them, we find them very, very useful, because that letter they are supposed to be writing is supposed to be written on the truth according to the way they know the person, and then the way they want the solution to be addressed. And so we have been working with the chiefs lately in a lot of amicable ways.
Okay, now patriarchy has been said to be one of those things that has really taken away the rights of women when it comes to inheritance and property ownership. When we come back, we talk more about the same. Stay with us.
Guys, unajua ukikula supa moja tutakuwa na superpowers?
Let me try.
Jiamini.
Wow.
Indomie, now available in chicken, beef, and Supermojo. Supermojo, Jiamini.
That was not my fault. No.
Death is inevitable, but that does not mean it's the end for your family. Protect them financially by getting the DTB Last Expense Cover. No need to break the bank when paying for the Last Expense Cover. Enjoy premiums as low as 600 shillings per year. We know death can occur at any time, and that is why we will process all the claims within 48 hours. With the DTB Last Expense, you can cover up to 5 nuclear family members, including parents and parents-in-law.
When the world changed, it made us go back to the simple joys and love the little things even more, like serving up your best, eating together, and sharing more. Now, we'll take nothing for granted and always remember to taste the simple joys. Coca-Cola, taste the simple joys.
So vile nasema, wacha nikubatie statistics. Niko na gamia 1,500. Tunakuwa drapo gamia na kuwa 6,000. 2,000 natengeneza leather, natengeneza viatu, wallet, kibeti, nauza hapa, na batia wewe 50%. Wacha niweke credit nikupigie.
Namna gani wewe? Hii mambo ya kuishiwa na credit kila saa? Come on. Nunua hiyo simu ya Vodafone. Calling fiber to fiber is 0 shillings per minute. And it is not expensive. Only 2,999 Kenya shillings.
Alo hali wa. Hata fadhali hiyo credit ikae ninunue simu basi.
Faibika leo na Vodafone for only 2,999 Kenya shillings. It will always be free to call fiber to fiber.
Come over. Wacha nikupikie Chef Ramsey. Yes.
Rina vegetable oil stays liquid to the last drop, so it's smooth cooking from start to finish. Now with an easy-to-pour cap, mapishi poa, madishi poa.
Breaking news from Molfix. Let's see what they're developing right now.
That is just for me. It really feels very comfy.
Molfix pants with anatomic fit technology.
New Molfix fans, an invention from babies for babies.
You should also try Molfix.
Looking really good.
I will give you the scandal of the century. My husband and his chief of staff are having an affair. I will see you both in court.
Samantha's been arrested because of the arson case against her.
Get those sisters fight each other more and make sure Samantha ends up abhorring Anna.
How dare you involve my family in your insanity? You deserve worse than rotting in prison.
You can't prove what you're saying. I hope your grandmother dies too.
Welcome to Garden of Joy in Machakos by Optiven. This is a gated community that is strategically located only 7 minutes drive from Komata. The title deeds are ready. Call us today on 0790 300 300.
It is the Nation Leadership Forum. My name is Gladys Gashanja, even as we speak about women's property rights. And my panelists are still raring to go. And speaking of which, Jessica Patriarchy has been said to be a thorn in the flesh, as we mentioned earlier. From your work, how much of this is used to infringe on the rights of women?
Thank you so much, Gladys. I will say that patriarchy is embedded in most communities. For example, among the western parts of Kenya where we work in, you find that it's very difficult for the community at large. For example, if someone is a widow, for them to be able to accept for her to be able to have a right to property because of the kind of cultures and traditions that we have. And sometimes it's unfortunate because most women are forced to undergo certain cultural practices as a requisite for them to be able to access land and property rights. You would figure out that most of these customs and traditions could not be very friendly, and therefore the women find it very difficult to be able to adhere to them. The challenge with that is if you refuse to adhere to these kind of customs, then sometimes you do not get your right to property because traditionally you have not met the standards. And this has led to very many women being stripped of their right to land and property. As Kellen, we have sort of settled a total of 714 cases of women in Kisumu and Homa Bay counties who had gone through retrogressive cultural practices. They had tried to fight the system. They had tried to get access to justice through other forms. But through working with the elders who were supposed to be the custodians of culture, then the elders were able to interpret what is culture, what is the kind of patriarchy that is continuing to embed women to continuous violations, and how does it relate to the law. And eventually we had people in the community who are sort of accepting that actually sometimes it's the social and the peer norms that affect women's right to property, and it's good for us to be able to make change, especially with regard to the Constitution.
And I hear you talking about certain regions of the country. Are we saying, do you have more problems in some parts than others?
From our experience, we have had a few issues, especially related to health-related human rights. One of the areas that we work with is HIV and AIDS. And you find that sometimes they are a layer of issues that affect women. And if you have a widow who's affected or infected with HIV, it becomes a little bit hard because sometimes they face different forms of discrimination. And that one, added to culture, makes the woman even more vulnerable. So from our experience, it depends on the cultural background, it depends on the health right issues of the woman, it depends on her status, because sometimes married women and unmarried women face different issues. Or, for example, daughters who have been married, sometimes they refuse that they can't be able to get access to property when they come back to their home because they believe they're getting property somewhere else.
So if we had a map of Kenya, would you see more red or place more reds on some parts of the country than others?
Definitely. Back in 2017, we did a research on the impact of the practice of dowry on women's property rights. And you'd be surprised because most people find dowry to be a token of appreciation and to be something that sort of welcomes the woman to the home. But it's the implications that become a problem. And this is where patriarchy shows up, because you find that there are people who, when the husband dies, then they will claim that the woman was not married at all, and therefore they use that to be able to strip them of their right to property. And there are various instances where we have certain communities that they are more to their culture, not taking into consideration the aspects of the constitution that could be coming in. And the blanket to it all is most people associate culture. If you refuse to adhere to a certain culture, then they assume a taboo will befall you, and that's where the fear is embedded.
Okay, and Faith, patriarchy could be one thing, but also you earlier mentioned about women also being their worst enemies. What did you mean by that?
Gladys, saying women are their worst enemies is not correct. Let's correct that statement first.
Okay.
That is not correct. I'd say that in terms of property rights, you get that in some instances, mothers-in-laws can be very nasty to women who have been married into the home. You get that at times sisters-in-laws can be very nasty to wives that are married into the home. But as I said earlier, it's important for women to understand their bundle of rights. Then it is easier to claim their rights. But in addition to what Jessica said, there's also some elements of patriarchy that are projected by government policies. I'd give an example in the compensation during mega projects. You get that they compensate the man, and they rarely find out if he's married, if he has 2 or 3 wives, or if he has a family. You get that most compensation schemes, they'd consider a man unless the woman insists on being included. Even in most of the public participation processes, you get that once a man is involved, then most processes, they feel like they've reached the threshold. You know, that's some element of patriarchy in the process of compensation during mega projects. So as we talk about patriarchy, we should also appreciate in the urban tenure, it's very alive. So we should also address it, not only in the context of communal lands or in the rural areas or agricultural areas, but also in the urban tenure, it's very alive. Men are considered to take precedence over women when it comes to compensation, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to public participation.
Elder Kalolo, how do you handle those that use patriarchy as a weapon?
Thank you very much. Actually, our culture as Luos was patriarchal in the sense that all matters to do with land were decided by the men. But as it were, it was the women who actually used the land, because being polygamous in our setting, the land that was belonging to the man was given to every woman so that the woman would keep that portion of land for herself and her children. And therefore, it was the woman to give her children whatever was given to her by the husband. And so it was equally shared with a lot of respect and honor. But as it were, things turned around to the extent that some people didn't think it was right to do so. And so it has been abused a number of times, especially in the advent of death. When a man dies, then some of those women who are not strong enough will stand to lose their rights. They don't get it at all. And that is when the elders now come in to put matters right, if it comes to our attention.
It's because a lot of it happens at times the elders themselves propagate the infringement of their rights. How do you toe the line between tradition and justice?
It is very much understandable because it is in line with our tradition. Land actually belonged to the man, and when the titling now comes around, the women are afraid to have their names on the titles. But we are encouraging today that they should have co-ownership so that in the demise of the man, then the woman who remains behind can use the land very comfortably because her name is also on the same title. We are dealing, as I said earlier, with a lot of ignorance, and it takes time really to teach people to change, that change has not come out fully, and it is not obvious that it will happen, because some people come from very difficult backgrounds. A woman comes around and she is told that she has to toe what her mother did, she has to do the same. So making that change come a reality takes the grace of God. We thank God that a number of things are changing today.
Okay, Justice Aroni, some ladies, women would say they shy away from coming to court to seek justice because they feel patriarchy has seeped into the corridors of justice. How is the family division addressing this?
Thank you for the question, and if you may allow me, I want to begin by saying that the issue that bedevils women's rights is really a societal issue more than a legal issue. And I'm hoping that with the association of or collaboration of Kellyn and others, that the information will seep through to society so that both men and women get to appreciate what the law entails as far as the rights of women are concerned. Now, when it comes to inheritance, the law of succession really ensures that there is no discrimination when it comes to inheritance. It doesn't consider the gender of the heirs of any particular estate. And then when it comes to the widow, she enjoys a life interest, and it's expected that, when she expires, then her children or the other heirs will be able to enjoy the rest of the property. So when it comes to law or the court, no such discrimination is experienced. I think the biggest problem we have is the fact that a lot of women do not have access to the court, and that is why the collaboration of elders is very, very important, because the courts cannot solve all the societal problems. The courts cannot reach out to the litigants. The court waits, because that's the system. We wait for the litigants to come to court. Sometimes it's not accessible. At times it's very expensive for them to be able to reach the court. Sometimes there's ignorance. So with the help of community elders, we should be able to disseminate, and women should be able to get what is rightfully theirs. The Constitution recognizes dispute resolution not only by courts, but also communities and other institutions.
And now we have talked about the will or the absence of the same faith. Kenyans believe, or most Africans believe, if you jot down a will, you're calling death on yourself. With that kind of belief, how has this deterred access to justice or even protecting the rights of women when it comes to property?
Gladys, a will is one of the best things that a person can do, be it a man or a woman, because not only does it express your wishes after you're gone, but it also protects your loved ones by telling them what you had and how you wanted your property to be divided, and who is entitled and who is not. People don't know, but you want them to have something. But of course, in the African traditional society, it was even obvious when someone feels like, okay, I'm on my way out, they'd call witnesses and request, this is how I want my land divided, this is what I want to be done when I'm gone. So I don't know where the notion of calling death comes in, but it's a protective tool that if all of us adopt it, it will be very good.
Elder Kalolo, how do you address such beliefs?
Well, it is true that every time an old man was about to die, they used to know it maybe out of instinct or age, and they would sit their people around and tell them what he intends that they should do in his demise. And this brought a lot of peace and protection to those who are survived. When this is not honored, then a lot of problems come around, because any man or a woman about to die would have to say something about the property that is being left behind, so that there is no problem, there is no dispute. In an event where there is dispute, it becomes very difficult if there was no will. But even then, the elders would sit around, agree with the people, and then they sit and begin to work on the way forward on how the property should be divided amongst the survivors.
And how do you address those that fear jotting it down because they think death will come?
How it is addressed? It is just people sitting around a table and beginning to converse. We don't come with answers to that particular family, but we sit them down and get their views. And once we get their views, then we are comfortable. We come out with resolutions.
Okay, now sensitization is important, especially when it comes to writing of a will, but the contents of the same go a long way in safeguarding the property rights when it comes to women. Jessica, what is your experience and why is this crucial?
Thank you, Gladys. From our experience, it has been very important to be able to sensitize communities, especially on the process of making a will. We do recognize that there are two types of wills. There is the oral will that Elder is talking about, where if someone is about to die, then they do the division of the property verbally, and they do call their witnesses, and they're able to have conversations with people about this will. The danger of this, I guess from our experience, would have been that most people who are deemed to be witnesses in these oral wills sometimes do have an interest in the property itself, or sometimes will claim that the will itself was not made because it serves their advantage in one way or another. So it's very important to be able to have conversations with communities, especially those that believe that if you write a will then you're calling death, for them to be able to understand the repercussions of not writing a will at all. Because, for example, you'd say as a man or as a woman, if you're not able to put in place how the property is going to be divided upon your death, then it becomes very difficult, because that is how women become victims of disinheritance, because people will crop up and say that they do own these properties. So from our experience, we've been trying to demystify the social norms and how they interact with aspects of making wills, so that we can be able to explain to people the importance of writing wills, and most importantly, how to make a valid will, because there is the aspect of making a will, and then there is the aspect of making a valid will. Because if you make a will that is not valid, then even if you have it written and you go with it to court, then it will still be questionable. And in some instances, it might even be rendered that you died without a will. So for us, we've been doing sensitization to ensure that all the elements of a will are put into consideration, whether you're making an oral or a written will.
And speaking of which, Kalina and the judiciary have come together to put a workbook that gives you an indication as to how to make a valid will. Justice Oroni, how does this come to play?
Well, thank you for the question. Realizing that there is need to educate the masses, the judiciary has collaborated with Kalin, and we have together come up with a booklet that educates the citizens on how to go about in writing a will, because as Jessica said, it's one thing writing a will and the other writing a valid will. And so that citizens are informed of the processes to go through and the need to really declare how they would want to have their properties divided amongst their heirs. We lead a very disorganized lives, and I must tell you that in the judiciary, in the family division, the bulk of the cases that we have relate to inheritance of property. So it would be an ideal situation if most Kenyans would, understand and be able to look at this material and be able to prepare valid wills during their lifetime and be able to decide on how their properties would fairly be shared amongst their heirs. There's also the other aspect of an oral will, like the elder said, and this, it is good to mention that oral wills are only valid for 3 months if, information is given before the death of a person. So it's not really a viable option. It is, we are better off with written wills that give fair distribution of property, because wills can also be challenged in court if they are not properly crafted, if they are not properly executed or witnessed, and if some of the heirs are left out.
Now, Caroline have really been behind this workbook. Jessica, if you can speak about the importance of the same.
Thank you, Gladys. From our experience, we have seen so many people who are not able to, for example, be able to access their right to property because of, for example, having wills that were invalid or not having wills at all. So as an avenue for women specifically to be able to claim their rights, to be able to explore the spaces that we have on access to justice, we have found it right to be able to sensitize the communities that we have through development of informative, educative materials that can be able to summarize the basic concept on how to make a valid will, what needs to go into that process, who do you need, and how do you ensure that your property is secured and rightly outlined so that the people who are deemed to be able to access your property are able to do so without any sort of interference. It is with this regard that Kellen partnered with the Family Division Court to be able to develop a simple IEC material on the process of making a valid will, both oral and written, so that we can be able to ensure that everyone is educated on the process of making these documents so as to access justice.
Okay, we take another short break right here on the Nation Leadership Forum. When we come back, we cannot ignore that we are facing the pandemic, and access to justice in as far as women's rights to property and, of course, inheritance has come up a lot. How is this being addressed? We find out in a moment.
The Aerial Guarantee.
Asante sana. Sasa, ni nini kingine ambacho unaweza ukamfanyia msichana wetu?
Kila kitu. Hata kufua nguo na Aerial mpya.
Basi, tuonyeshe.
Hey, sasa fanya hayo madoa yawe sugu zaidi. Sasa tufue kwa kutumia sabuni yako na kutumia Aerial mpya. Aerial sasa inapatikana kwenye pakiti mpya. Unaniamini sasa?
Aerial huondoa madoa sugu kwa mwosho mmoja. Ijaribu leo uamini.
New look, same great taste.
Ah, Helen Paul.
Hello, madam. Would you like to join us on this mission?
Yes, but how?
Just one question for you. How do you keep your toilet clean?
I use regular detergent and bleach for washing and removing yellow stains. I've been using it for years.
Oh, madam, the regular detergents and bleach are used for washing clothes. To disinfect your toilet properly, you need Harpic 10X. It is specially made for germs and stains removal. Harpic's thick formula settles on stains and gives 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach.
Wow, now I'm convinced, Helen Paul.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that she's part of the mission, the next house is yours.
Disinfect and protect your home with Jik. Jik kills 99.9% of illness-causing germs. Disinfect floors, kitchen and bathroom surfaces, and wash white clothes, towels, and dishcloths with Jik bleach. Just Jik it.
Across Africa, in homes, towns and cities, men, women and children will stop, united by football. It's the world's game.
Glorious! Oh, that is out of this world!
Stay connected to DSTV to watch the world's best football.
This is NTV.
Tonight, another governor, another graft case. DPP orders arrest of Garissa Governor Ali Korane over a 233 million shilling scandal. The governors threatened the media, but EACC says these are just illegal smokescreens. Also tonight, politics is back, and out the back door go the COVID-19 containment rules. Political pursuit over people in a pandemic. The rule of law remains underfoot. And a new level 6 hospital has officially been opened.
And our nation will no doubt see a marked improvement in the quality of healthcare infrastructure.
On the other hand, Baringo medics are on strike and the sick have been struck hard.
Na naambia aende nyumbani. Kwa sababu hakuna pesa, inanibidi nirudisha mgonjwa nyumbani.
One country, two sides of the healthcare coin. Plus, from presidential addresses to press conferences.
Na yeye hana mask. Mwambie mimi nikikuangalia wewe naona kifo.
The moment you introduce fear, it leads to stigma, it then leads to discrimination, and it results in human rights violation.
Analyzing the communication in tonight's 6 months, a pandemic.
Geisha aloe vera and honey, made with the goodness of aloe vera to calm and refresh your skin.
Be strong and last long.
When they flip and roll and start to crawl away, tape diapers can be hard to put on. Then it's time for all-round fit Pampers pants. Easy to pull on even when they're moving around for a great fit and up to 12 hours of dryness. And easy to remove. Just tear the sides, lift away, roll up the pants, and you're all done. Now available in size 6. Pampers, love, sleep, and play.
When the world changed, it made us go back to the simple joys and love the little things even more. Like serving up your best, eating together, and sharing more. Now, we'll take nothing for granted. And always remember to taste the simple joys. Coca-Cola. Taste the simple joys.
Melissa? Mom, it's Dad's birthday today. I'm giving him a party just like he gives me.
Nothing makes a mother more proud than seeing her child growing up. But I know that as she learns to care for others, she'll face even more germs and the risk of illnesses.
That's why you need strong Dettol protection. Just 1 cup of Dettol protects your home and family from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
The Dettol range is available on Jumia. Shop safely and conveniently today.
Thank you for staying with the Nation Leadership Forum. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and before we went to break, we're talking about the importance of writing a will and knowing how to write a valid one. Now, another issue comes in now in as far as the infringement of the rights of women when it comes to inheritance and property ownership, human rights violations. Jessica, we could be talking about property, wills, and what have you, but the ripple effects could be silent, but they are there. Talk about these.
Thank you, Gladys. I will say that Kenya has ratified various international legal instruments that also talk about the protection of women, specifically human rights protection of the women. So when we talk about issues relating to women being subjected to cultural practices, inheritance, the cleansing processes, it goes against various international human rights principles. The basic aspect of it being human dignity, because at the end of the day, the kind of practices that the women are made to go through are those that, first of all, do sort of shame them as individuals, and it puts them in a level that they do not feel that they're equally treated by the rest of the members of the society. There are so many aspects of non-discrimination that is coming in, because you find that there are certain women who these kind of offenses are meted on, but then it becomes more of a psychological issue, it becomes more of a social issue, because once one goes through this process, then it is not something that is just supposed to be focused on as a day thing. But when you hear from the women themselves, when they're telling you the stories post the mediation, they will tell you that whatever happened to them 10 years ago has affected their lives and has affected the kind of relationships that they're having to people. So it means that once someone goes through this process, it is not only about the basic issues of being able to access these rights, but it goes to psychosocial issues relating to this. Being subjected to some sort of violations, because in the process of inheritance, there is usually the aspect of violation, bodily harm, because sometimes the violation and the eviction is done by force. If this is done, then the woman becomes a victim of domestic violence. At the same time, you find that their houses are destroyed. They are sent to live in the market centers, and it becomes very hard for them to be able to provide for their families, and therefore aspects of economic rights come into play. So you find that women who have gone through these practices are facing a myriad of issues that need to be addressed at different levels. As we look at access to justice, it's a good thing, but we also need to look at the human rights violations that are meted on these women and how to be able to ensure that we bring these women to a status of being dignified and being respected as a human being who has rights.
And Faith, you were talking about the importance of knowing that there are laws that actually speak against such practices.
Thank you very much, Gladys. Just in addition to what Jessica said, since our laws, that is Article 24, 25, 26, include international laws as part of our laws and they can be referred to, I'd also like to add, on the international laws, I'd like to add CEDAW. The Beijing Plus 25 is due for review this year, and women land rights is one of the key areas that they'll be looking into. There are the SDGs. There's the SDG 2, 1, 5, 16, and 17. If someone is curious, they just go and find out what those SDGs are talking about. But locally, we have a law that is referred to as Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. I think it was passed in 2013. And there are actually around three offenses that Jessica has mentioned that this act is very express on. Interference by in-laws is an offense under this act. So when women or when wives are being molested or harassed or threatened or caused to feel uncomfortable in their matrimonial homes, that is an interference by an in-law. So we should be aware that we are at times committing offenses without knowing. The issue of rituals, you get that before your husband is buried, you have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. If you do not agree with it, according to that act, that is an offense. The issue of in-laws trying to take over your property from you, that is an offense according to the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act 2013. So there are offenses that we are committing without knowing we are committing them, but they are offenses, so we should be watchful.
All right, Elder Kalolo, what would you say for those that believe culture supersedes the law and even basic human rights?
Well, it is very true. It has been said that Constitution is supreme, but at the same time, culture may not be the same all over, because wherever people live, they live in their own way and in their own setup. So there has to be an agreeable measurement on how to talk about the differences in cultures. But there must be an agreement because they all talk about human rights. And human rights are across the board, whether it is cultural, whether it is the law, whatever it is. Every time they are talking about humanity and their peace and how they can coexist and live together. So I believe that culture plays a very important role because where there is no culture, you discover that there will be a lot of confusion. People will not know which way to move to and how to do whatever they want to do. So there has to be a set of rules and laws such that people may live in harmony and in peace. Yeah.
Okay, and Justice Oroni, earlier you mentioned about access to justice being a challenge for many women. In the face of a pandemic, what has been the status?
Thank you, Gladys, for the question. The judiciary has remained open and active during the pandemic. We slowed the open court sessions, but we've had virtual hearings throughout. There's always a judicial officer or several judicial officers on duty. The courts are open and we've been able to, entertain and listen to cases that have been brought before court. So this should go out to everybody that the courts are not closed. We are on duty. We are receiving, litigants, petitions, and there are always judicial officers on duty, and we have been writing our rulings and judgments and having hearings, as I mentioned. So the pandemic has not been a hindrance as such. We may not be as active as in, the normal way, but the courts are still there, open and ready to receive and to hear cases that are brought forth.
And how do the wheels of justice cater for that woman in Mandera, Wajir, Turkana County, far-flung areas?
In situations where the litigants are not able to virtually access the courts, limited access has been allowed. Litigants have been let in to be attended to by judicial officers. So we are not completely closed. We are not completely dealing through virtual hearings. Courts are open, but very limited, where in some instances, just the litigant and the lawyer without a big crowd being able to access a judicial officer. And let me tell you that surprisingly, Kenyans are really IT compliant. Ordinarily, we are able to have, citizens go to their phones or cyber cafes to access the court. So it's not as bad as it is. Kenyans are able to access in many instances through virtual hearing. Okay. I think we are all learning to survive, and we are all learning how to be IT compliant. So I wouldn't say that the courts or the litigants have been unable to access justice. It may be slow, but we are getting there.
Okay, going back to the importance of being informed about how to go about some processes, faith land registration has been an issue for many women. How do you address this, and which are the loopholes you come across?
Thank you very much, Gladys. It depends with what classification of land you want to register. We have the community lands. It's a process that is ongoing right now. We have the Community Land Act 2016, and it's going on right now. The ministry has just rolled the process in some areas, especially the ASAL areas. So if a woman belongs to a community that wants to register their community land, first of all, she'll be registered as part of the community as long as she's above 18. Then she'll have voting rights. After having voting rights, the register will form a community assembly From the community assembly, a management committee will be derived from the community assembly of 15, which should include women. So if you are living on community land, that process should start, whereby your community comes together, registers, develops bylaws, and approaches the community land registrar, and they assist you in registering your land. And as a woman, your interest will be registered under that interest. When you're registering private land, because land is in 3: community, private, and government land. So when you're registering your private land, the processes are very straightforward. There's the Land Registration Act of 2012, which was amended in 2016 by the Land Laws Amendment Act of 2016, which was also amended by the Land Amendment Act of 2019, which was touching on valuation, especially in context of compulsory acquisition. So if you're registering private land, it's very straightforward. You just follow the law. There are templates that you follow. But as a woman, you should not be nervous because your name is not on a title, because judge will also indicate that there's the issue of presumption of trusteeship if someone is legally married, and there are regimes of marriage. So if you're legally married under a regime, and if you're legally married and your marriage, there's even presumption of marriage, as long as property was bought during the subsistence of a marriage, a woman can prove it and she's secure.
Okay, and early on you said you would like to pose a question to Justice Arone. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to ask Justice just to tell us a little bit about the difference between a spouse and a dependent. We understand that in Kenya we call them nyumba ndogo, mpango wa kando. What are the entitlements when it comes to inheritance, possession of matrimonial property, and just the overall interaction with the will?
Thank you for that question. Now, a dependent is anyone who relied on the deceased person for their upkeep, or, in other words, an heir to the property. On the other hand, I would also want to say that the law of succession recognizes widows or spouses who were married under the various laws that we have, be it traditional or customary, religious, or where there is presumption of marriage. So that when it comes to inheritance of property, the court expects that when a list of dependents or heirs is brought to court, then the spouses who have been left behind will come in. And there are instances where the first wife will come in and claim to be the only dependent or the only wife to the deceased person. However, the law of succession, recognizing the lifestyle of Kenyans, where a man would marry in church but would move out and marry another wife traditionally, or would have, let me deal with those who were married traditionally, or he would again take another wife and live with her without undergoing any system of marriage, but would have a child or children with this woman. Then the court or the law is liberal enough to consider the children out of such a union, and the woman who lived with this man for several years, got children, and created wealth together. So the law would not shut it. The law has not shut its eyes to the fact that a man married in church and during his lifetime also got into other arrangements with other women. So the word spouse, when it comes to the law of succession, is dealt with in a liberal manner, so as to ensure that those who were close to the deceased and lived with him during his lifetime are not altogether discounted or removed from the list of spouses or dependents.
Okay, now, Jessica, we're talking a lot about spouses, widows, but also there's a category of the girl child being disinherited by her brothers or her family. What are the experiences you've come across?
Thank you so much, Gladys. From our experience, especially with regard to the laws, when it comes to inheritance rights, we make reference to the Law of Succession Act, which fortunately do recognize that children have equal rights to inheritance, and it doesn't distinguish between whether one had male or female children. So that one never comes into contention. The only aspect that comes into contention in most instances and in practice is usually that for most women, even as much as they have been listed down as beneficiaries, in terms of accessing their inheritance rights, sometimes most of them decide to abstain from the process. And again, this is still affected by the kind of cultural values that we have. So you'd have somebody going through the succession process and then being recognized as a legal heir, but when they go to court and they're told that this is supposed to be your parcel of land, some of them decide to give up their property and say that they would like to leave it to the men. And I think this is an intertwine of where the culture comes in and where patriarchy comes in, because in most societies, people believe that once a woman is married, she no longer lives in that land, and therefore she'll go live somewhere else. And therefore the male relatives are the ones who are supposed to stay in this land. And most of them, because they fear stigma and discrimination, will decide to give up their rights. And that's the thin line that we really have to tread carefully on, because if somebody gives up their right, it becomes more of your hands being tried. But sometimes they give up their rights out of ignorance. So I think there's need for us to be able to, first of all, find an opportunity to be able to review our Law of Succession Act, because we have realized that specifically how it interacts with the rights of men and the rights of women is slightly deferred, specifically when you're talking about aspects of widows. I know Judge mentioned that earlier, but there is a precondition specifically for the widows to lose their right, to lose their life interest, specifically if they get remarried. But the same does not apply to the men. So it's more of differential treatment when it comes to inheritance rights. There are those rights that are automatic, but for women, it depends on your status in the community.
Now, we are bringing this conversation to a close. Your closing remarks: with great laws in place to safeguard women's property rights, how can the stakeholders, starting from the chief all the way, as we mentioned, ensure that women are given a fair chance? Let's start off with you, Faith.
I'd close by saying that there are ongoing processes that women should not lose focus on. Like the review of the National Land Policy, it's due this year. It's run for 10 years. Women should not let that process pass them by. Remember, the National Land Policy was passed before the Constitution was passed. It was passed in 2009, while the Constitution was enacted in 2010. So women should not let that process pass them by. There's the digitization of land registries that is ongoing. I know most women might be they might face challenges in interacting with the digitization process, but it should that process should not intimidate them. They should find out if you have any interest in your land. Go find out if the documents that are being uploaded in any system reflect the true record of your land as your certificate of title reflects. And then lastly, I'd just like to say that women land rights is very important. Land in the hands of women is a powerful economic catalyst. We know that when women have land, they have secure livelihoods. We know that when women have land, they have better food security, better access to justice. So land in the hands of women is a very powerful economic catalyst. Thank you very much, Gladys.
Well said, Elder Kasuku. The role of men in a patriarchal society cannot be ignored. Now, a word for those who believe that, again, culture and tradition supersede the law?
Yes, what I would want to say is that the number of fears that have been in women possessing and owning land is that after the demise, after the death of their husbands, some women would opt to go out away from their matrimonial homes. And then the people of that community would feel that they are deprived of something, just as it has been said, that a woman was a wife to the community. This still holds in the Luo culture. We believe that once a woman is married in a place, she belongs there, and even after death, she is still a member of that particular community. So in an event where the husband is dead and the woman wants to go to look for another marriage, sometimes it becomes very challenging. We feel that that woman should still belong and should stay around and maybe get to move together with the people who are left behind. Otherwise, it is most important that people should live with respect and love so that we become very useful and active members of our communities. I also believe that once we live in that harmony and in respect to the laws that we have, then there shall not be much conflict in our ways of dealing with things.
Thank you, Elder Kalolo. The judiciary, how can this be done or used to ensure that we safeguard the rights of women? Justice Oroni?
Thank you. I want to believe that there is need for all of us to appreciate and understand the law and the processes that would enable women be able to fight for what is rightfully theirs. We have a very good constitution. We have very good progressive laws, as I mentioned before, and the courts are open, fair, and just to all parties that bring their cases before us. So women should not shy away where they feel that they need to access justice through the courts. They are open, and they will certainly receive justice if they bring their matters before us.
Jessica, your parting shot.
Thank you so much, Gladys. I will start by saying that on 27th of August, the Honorable Chief Justice launched the Alternative Justice System policy, and this is a great opportunity for women, especially those seeking access to justice, access to property, and they are not able to afford the courts. They can be able to go through the cultural structures, which are the elders, the chiefs, and there are other very many structures that exist at the community level, which will not cost them much. And organizations such as Kellen are willing to be able to support you through this process so that you can be able to claim your rights and to be able to secure the rights of your family and of your future so that you can be able to continue protecting your family.
Thank you. That is Jessica Oluoch from Kellen. She's a human rights lawyer, senior programs officer. Faith Alube, CEO, Kenya Land Alliance. Honorable Justice Abida Ali Oroni, Judge of the High Court Family Division. And of course, Bishop Kasuku Kalolo, he's also an elder of the Luo Council of Elders. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation on women's rights to inheritance and, of course, property ownership. It has been a pleasure hosting the same. NTV Tonight start right after this.